let's get started. So, hi everyone. Today we are going to do a deep dive into the Nym token economics. I am Claudia Diaz. I'm the chief scientist at Nym Technologies. Okay, so next slide. Just a very brief outline of the talk today. I will first briefly introduce the Nym economic model. I will then zoom in three important parts of this economic model, meaning the gateways incentives, the mixed mining reserve, and the mixed node rewards algorithm. Okay, so next slide. Just as a reminder, because I believe you already saw this in some of the previous talks, this is the kind of model of the network I'm kind of considering here. So basically, we have a mixed net with the nodes arranged in 3 layers, and these nodes are a subset of all the existing nodes. So we might have other nodes that are selected to be in reserve and other nodes that are not selected for being in the mixed net in this epoch. I will come back to these categories later. The important thing is to know that out of all the mixed nodes, a few of them will be selected to be active in the network. So once these nodes are active in the network, they are ready to shuffle forward packets, process packets from users, and users are able to send packets to the mixed net via the gateways, which act as an interface between end users and the mixed net. And then orchestrating all of this, we have a set of validators that are maintaining the NIX blockchain. And this is the blockchain where all the important information of the network is available, so that you can download the list of nodes, their public keys, and that allows you to route packets, and also executes the smart contracts where the rewards algorithms are executed. Okay, so how does the economic model kind of account for all of these entities that we see here? So here's kind of the big picture, and I will start here with the stakeholders. Okay, so who are the stakeholders? Are basically anybody who has Nym tokens. So even if you only have one Nym token, you're already like a stakeholder in the system. Okay, so stakeholders that have Nym tokens, they can do two things with them. And notice that I'm talking about the long-term vision here. I'm talking about how the system will work eventually. This is not the working today, because right now the system is free to use, because we're still kind of adjusting things, finalizing things. So it's still at this stage is free to use for everybody. At some point, the long-term vision is that this is an economic system that will provide a service to users, namely a private networking service, and users will pay for this service the same way they pay today for a VPN service, whatever, $5, $10 a month. And that allows them to have a certain amount of bandwidth in the month that they can send through the service. So this is a very similar kind of idea. And eventually, yeah, once the user payments are enabled, then this full economy that I'm explaining today will be functioning. Okay, so let's go back to the stakeholders. They have some NIMs, and they can do two things with these NIMs. Okay, they can spend them on using the service. So I have whatever 10 NIMs. I'm going to convert them into bandwidth, and I will get some amounts of gigabytes that I can send through the network. So this is one thing I can do. I spend the NIMs on the service, or I can stake my NIMs on mixed nodes, and I'll come back to that. Okay, so let's follow first the kind of the fees. So the stakeholders spend tokens on the service, and this is what we call the fees income. Okay, so the income that came from users paying for the service. So how is this income distributed? So part of it is going to be blockchain transaction fees, and these are paid to the validators. And here in Nym, the validators are providing kind of a third-party service, maintaining the blockchain that keeps count of the transactions and that keeps the smart contracts. Okay. These validators, they might be maintaining this blockchain that supports not only Nym but many other services, and they might be getting transaction fees from other services as well. Okay. So that's what concerns the validators. And then so that's the transaction fee, but I also pay for the bandwidth. So imagine I'm just making up the price now. I pay $5 for whatever, 5 gigabytes to use in the month. So this would be the fees that I pay for bandwidth. Okay, $5 for 5 gigabytes over a month. That's an example. So these fees are split between the gateway and the mixed net. Okay, So if you go back here, you see that both the gateway and the mixnet are involved in routing these packets, right? So both of them, both categories of participants do work, right? So, and both get rewarded from these fees. So I will explain a little bit more in detail later, but the gateways effectively will get like a percentage of the fees goes to the gateway that's serving the user. And the rest of these fees go into a budget that is going to be the budget of rewards for the mixnet, okay? So if I have 100 income in fees, 40% goes to the gateways, 60% goes to this budget, okay? Now, this budget then has to be distributed amongst the different mix nodes, right? So mix nodes that did the work to provide the service will get paid for their work, so they will receive rewards from this budget, and then these rewards will be split between the operator of the node and the delegates that supported the node with their stake. Okay, so in the final kind of long-term vision here, this is a circular economy where a stakeholder spends token on the service. This token is then allocated to the providers of the service, gateways, validators, and mix nodes. The people receiving these tokens are themselves stakeholders, and then that basically keeps the economy circulating, where you have like users paying for the service and then providers receiving rewards for their work. Okay. Now, besides this kind of closed economy, we have the mixed mining pool, which is a bootstrapping reserve that also adds rewards to the mixed mining, to the budget of rewards that you have for the mixnet. And I will come back to this to explain more in detail how it works and why we need it. Okay. So first, I want to talk about the gateways rewards, and then I will deep dive on the mixed node rewards. Okay, so with respect to gateways, next slide. They have different functions, so they are basically an interface between the users and the mixnet, okay? And they do a number of things. They will collect the user credentials, which are the proofs of payment. So once there's a paid system, gateways have the responsibility to check that the people have an entrance ticket that they paid for in order to have to use the system and to send a certain amount of packets through the system. Once a user has paid to the gateway with a credential, the gateway will forward the Sphinx packets of this user, so the traffic of this user, to the mixnet, and will keep the packets received for the user from the mixnet. It will take care of sending acknowledgements for received packets and caching them, storing them if the user is offline, so that when the user comes online, they can pull the packets and receive their payloads, the data that is for them. Okay, gateways are the only entities directly interacting with client devices. So basically, by having a gateway, we are shielding the IP address of the client device from the mix nodes in the network. The mix nodes don't need to know any of these client devices. They don't get to see them. They only talk to gateways, which act as intermediaries between clients and the mixnet. And optionally, we can think of these gateways offering additional capabilities. For example, censorship circumvention, if Nym would become very popular, and then maybe in some places there would be like some blocking of Nym, then gateways could have some features to make it easier to bypass censorship and still allow access to the network to people in places where the service might be blocked. Or they can have other capabilities or services. Maybe the gateway is offering you a private mail service or some other bundled services in addition to access to the mixnet. This is optional. Differently from the mixed nodes, the gateways are chosen by the user. So you are a user that comes into the network, and you will, when you are, especially when it's a paid network, you will have this payment credential, this bandwidth credential that you paid for, and now this is the entrance ticket, and you select one of the entrances to the system, which is a gateway, right? And then you spend this credential with this gateway. Imagine you bought whatever 5 gigabytes of Nym, so you will go to a gateway, you will show this credential to the gateway, and the gateway will say, okay, so Claudia just gave me like a ticket for 5 gigabytes, so I will forward her traffic until her budget, her allowance is expired, right? So This is different from the mixed nodes, which are selected at random by my software, the client software, every time I generate a packet. Okay, so every packet will select some random mixed nodes and will be processed by those random mixed nodes. So that means that all the mixed nodes that are active in the network, they perform more or less the same amount of work, right? They all of them receive more or less the same amount of packets because they are chosen equally, uniformly at random, right? And therefore, when we do the rewards for mixed nodes, we have to do this kind of collective accounting that we say, okay, all of them had the same amount of work to do. Then if they perform the work, we pay them proportionally, right? To their reputation and their performance. But for gateways is different. For gateways, because they are chosen by the user and the user sticks to the gateway. If I choose a gateway and it's a really good gateway, or it's always online, offers some additional services, is very fast, it's very good, so I stick to the gateway, right? If the gateway is offline, it loses my packets, when I want to retrieve things, it gives errors, whatever, then I will change gateway, right? So the idea is that gateways, somehow they have to compete for users because they will be funded by a fraction of the fees paid by their own users, right? So if I am paying, let's say 100 NIMs, and 40% goes to the gateways. Basically, 40% will go to my gateway, the one I chose, because they are serving me and they are getting a fraction of my payment, right? While the rest will be going to this kind of a common account that will then be allocated to all of the mixed nodes, because all of the mixed nodes are involved in providing me with the service. While only my gateway is involved with providing me with the service, the other gateways are providing services to other users. Right? So that means that the gateways, they kind of compete for users. If you're a big gateway that has many users, you will be getting 40% of all their fees. That can be very profitable if you have a large number of users. And if you are not providing a good service, you might lose your users. They will use somebody else for their next credential, and that means you will dry out your income, and you will not have much of a business because you don't have customers, right, as a gateway. So users can also run their own gateway. This has some advantages and some disadvantages. So one of the advantages is that if you run your own gateway, you're not exposing your client IP address to anybody in the network, only to your own gateway that you control. So it kind of shields your client IP address. You're not even disclosing it to some gateway. You're disclosing it to your own, so to no third parties. So that's nice. You would also get a discounted service because you would recoup 40% of the usage that you paid, because it gets paid back to your own gateway. So you recover that amount of the fee. And it has some downsides. So there is some advantages to having a gateway, to using a gateway that many other people use, because if an adversary is monitoring kind of the activity in this gateway, and you're sharing this gateway with thousands of other people, whenever the gateway is sending a packet, it can be from any of the thousands of people that are using it, right? So it doesn't leak information about individual users when they are online, when they are doing something or not. If you have your personal gateway and nobody else is using it, then when you're offline, there is no traffic coming from it. When you're online, then there is traffic coming from it. So it is a little bit more observable when you're online and offline. Okay. So I go to the next slide now. So coming back to the economic model, I now want to zoom in the mixed mining pool. Okay, so what is this mixed mining pool? So the mixed mining pool is effectively a reserve that we use for bootstrapping the system. And why we need this? Because otherwise we would have a chicken and egg problem, right? So anonymity, there is this idea that anonymity loves company. So that means that the more users you have in the system, the better the anonymity you can provide to each of these users, because each of them will be mixed with a lot of people. And that means that it becomes very difficult to associate the senders and receivers of input and output packets, right? So a big user base helps you provide a better service. Now, at the start, there is not much incentive to pay for the system, because if not on many other people, there is no network effect. If other people are not there, if you're the first one to come onto the system, you would have to pay and actually not get such great anonymity, because there is not so many people to mix with, right? So, and it would be very difficult, like if I'm the only user in the beginning, I'm the first user, who's paying all these operators that need to be there in order to do the work if, in the beginning there is not so much work to be done. So you could be in a situation where there is a low quality of service at the start because there is low income, low funding, and because there is low funding, you never attract more users, and then you never grow, right? So this is kind of a bootstrapping problem. So the bootstrapping problem can be solved with a reserve, the mixed mining reserve. So this is essentially an initial funding that can support the infrastructure until there is enough usage to be self-sustainable, okay? So in the current system, we have a 25% of the initial token supply being locked in a reserve. So this is 250 million NIMs. Is locked in a reserve, and this provides rewards to the system in addition to the income from fees. So it's like kind of some reserve that even if there is no paid usage, as it is the case right now, that people can use the system, but they are not paying for it. Where does the rewards come from? In the meantime, they come from this mixed mining reserve, okay? So how does this reserve work? It was initialized with 250 million, 25% of the total supply, okay? And then every month, there is the reserve is releasing for rewards 2%, okay? So 2% of 250 million is 5 million, okay? So 5 million are made available originally in the first month for rewards. The 5 million are not available at the same time in one go, but actually it's per hour. Every hour, like a fraction is made available. So 1 month has 720 hours on average, counting 30 days with 24 hours per day. So basically, the 250 million of the reserve, we first take 2%, so that would be 5 million, and then we divide that in 720 hours, and that gives the budget per hour of rewards, okay? Like 250 million was the initial stage. Right now, it is at 245 because 5 million were already given out to mixed nodes. So right now, it is a bit less than 5 million. It's 4.9 million per month, which is 2% of 245, are made available. And that comes down to 6,800 NIMs per hour. So every hour, the reserve makes available 6,800 NIMs for rewards, okay? Now, not all of these rewards are given out, because to give out all the rewards, you would have to have a situation where all the nodes that are active in the system have full saturation, and they have perfect performance, and they have a very high bond. If you have a situation which normally you never achieve this ideal situation, then the nodes that have less than full saturation will receive proportionally less rewards. The nodes that have less than perfect performance will also receive proportionally less rewards, and the nodes that have a low bond will receive a factor less of rewards as well. The current situation is that of the currently 6,800 NIMs per hour are made available, and only 1,300 are distributed to nodes in the current state. This is, I checked yesterday, this is the numbers for yesterday, while the other 5,500, they remain in the pool. So the pool makes available 6,800. This is the potential. From there, some of it will effectively be given to nodes. The rest is not allocated and is just kept in the pool, and then it will be, again, for the future, because every time you take 2% of whatever is left, right? So if you give out less, you have more left for longer time. The idea is that after some years, the main source of income for the system should be user fees, and not the bootstrap, not the mixed mining reserve. This is mainly for the beginning. This is a little bit similar to Bitcoin mining fees, but it's very different in some ways as well. In Bitcoin, you have a limit of transactions per minute that can be put in the network, and the fees are used as an auction mechanism to get your transactions in. So basically, the capacity of the network stays constant, and as more people are competing to get their transactions into this limited capacity, they will have to bid higher with these fees in order to achieve, that their transaction is good enough, has enough high fee that is taken by the Bitcoin peers, right? Here is different. Here, if you have more users, you grow in capacity. So more fees means more income. So the price per bandwidth or whatever, this is kind of constant. It's based on the cost of bandwidth, on the cost of running nodes. It doesn't depend on how many other users there are. And then once you have a growth in the number of users, what you have is more fees, more income comes. Even if every person is paying the same, you have more people paying, so that's up to more money. And then you can use that to fund more mixed nodes to be able to provide the capacity that is necessary to serve everybody. So basically, it allows scaling, okay? In Bitcoin, you don't have scaling, you just have more expensive service. Here, the service price stays the same. If more people use the service, the extra money is used to increase the capacity of the service. Okay, so this is how it looks like right now. So this is the 6,800, the blue line. So this is what is made available in each of the hours. So this is like for 250 hours here, about 10 days. Then the orange line is what is effectively distributed. And the green line is the part that was potentially available for rewards, but was not distributed, so it stays in the mixed mining pool. If this would continue like this, for the next 10 years, if we would extrapolate this for the next 10 years, then the mixed mining pool would be declining as we see here. So basically after 10 years, we would still have like 150 million in the mixed mining pool. So it would not deplete so quickly. And this would be after 10 years, we would be emitting, we would be emitting 3,500, of which like 20% is given out and 80% is kept. Okay, so it's a very slow decline if we would keep with these parameters. Of course, we would expect that as more staking comes into the network and as nodes have, improving their performance and their saturation, there would be more rewards given out. So we would expect this to be distributing more of these available rewards to the nodes. In the limit, if 100% of the available rewards would be distributed every epoch, this is how the curve would look like. Basically, we would be at half of the amount in about 3 years. So it still takes like 3 years at maximum speed of depleting. It would still take about 3 years to spend the first half of the reserve. Here. Okay, here you can see that the distributed is coinciding with the emitted, and the retained is 0 because we are assuming that everything is distributed. Okay. So now I want to go back to here and focus on the main item, which is the rewards, the algorithm that we use, like given a budget. So just to recap, this budget comes from 2 sources, right? Like part of it is the mixed mining rewards so this is the 6,800 NIMs per hour that were emitted from the mixed mining pool at the moment. And at this moment, this is a 0 because there is no income coming from fees, but at some point, the budget will be the sum of the fees that correspond to the mixed node after taking the fees for the gateways and the mixed mining reward. So that results in a budget for the epoch that we have for rewarding the full mixnet, okay? So then the next thing is, what do we do with this budget? Part of it we will give in rewards to mixed nodes that then we'll have to split it between operators and delegates. And the other part that remains unclaimed will go back to the pool for funding the network in the future. Okay, we don't spend, if the network is not like super staked or super performant, then okay, we pay less and we keep this money for the future when the network will be more saturated. Okay, so basically in this system, we are conceptualizing stake as reputation, and reputation is effectively represented by the total stake that is associated to a node, including both the bonds and the delegations, okay? So this reputation, it has maxes out. So when you reach the stake saturation point. So what is this stake saturation point? Stake saturation point is basically saying a node will receive, the more stake a node has, the more rewards it receives, but up to a point. Like right now, this point is 730,000 NIMs. If you have more than 730,000 NIMs, you will receive still the same rewards. You have 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, it doesn't matter. The node is capped in rewards for that. Why do we do that? We do that in order to prevent that the stake is over-concentrated on a few nodes, because you have to think that in a mixed net, you need to have like some number of nodes to serve all the packets. You cannot just have a mixed net with one node, even if it's like a really good node. You need to have more of them. So in order to say, if we say, okay, we want to have at least 240 nodes, right? Then we need to ensure that we're incentivizing stakeholders to fund, to stake on 240 nodes, right? So basically the saturation point is very simple, very simply computed as the target staking supply you want to have in the system divided by the target number of nodes. Okay, so if I want to have, just to give you a simple number, 100 million is the full staking that I want to have, the target staking, I want to have 100 million staked in the system, and I have 100 nodes, then 1 million per node, because if you would allow more than 1 million per node, then it would be suboptimal, right? Like some nodes would not be able to have like 1 million in stake. So in order to ensure that once a node has been fully saturated, the incentive is for the stakeholders to support other nodes that are undersaturated. Okay, so the target stake supply divided by the target number of nodes. What is the target staking supply? Is a percentage of the available staking supply, right? So the available staking supply is all the tokens that you can possibly stake in the network. So what are the tokens that you can possibly stake in the network? So they're all the circulating tokens. Any token that you can transfer to, that is liquid, that you can transfer to another account, you can stake, okay? And then we also allowed for a percentage of unvested tokens to be used for staking, and this percentage is 10%. Okay, so if you have locked accounts, you can use 10% of your locked account, of your locked tokens for staking, in addition to any circulating tokens that you have. Okay, and then why 50%? Well, because otherwise, if we don't take a fraction here, it would require that all of the staking supply that is available in the network would have to be staked for the network to maximize rewards. And this is kind of, it's a bit unachievable, because you will always have some people that, I don't know, they don't want to have their token staked for one or another reason. So the idea here is that we aim for 50%. So if half of the available supply is staked, then the network will already reach these maximum rewards. Okay. So currently the saturation point is 730 NIMs, because the staking supply is 350 million. The total staking supply is 350 million. Half of it is 175, and we have as a target number of nodes 240. So if you do the math, it comes down to this number. Okay. And the idea with reputation and the stakeholders supporting gnomes, it has to be meaningful in some way. And here, like, one of the advantages is that because the supply of staking is limited, nodes have to compete for the stakeholder support, right? So if I have a node, but my node doesn't have a very good performance or doesn't have attractive parameters, then I will not be able to attract the people, the stakeholders that are looking for nodes to delegate. They will go somewhere else. So the idea of the incentive system is that we want to use this staking system to incentivize a good network that works well. So we want to incentivize the stakeholders to support the best nodes for the network. And what are the best nodes? So first thing is that the best nodes are those that have a good reliability and good performance. So that means they are always online, they don't go down, and they don't lose packets. They don't become congested and start losing packets, okay? So this is like very important, because if you don't have reliable nodes, then the experience for the users is not going to be very good, and then the system will not be successful. Then the next thing is cost effectiveness. So if I am able to operate a node and provide the same performance and the same service as others for a fraction of the cost, that's a good thing for the system. So we want to incentivize the stakeholders to support the nodes that are able to do the job with a lower cost. And the operator stake is an indication of how much skin in the game the node operator has. So we want to favor operators that themselves are putting their own money on the table. So those nodes that have higher operator bonds will provide kind of a premium in terms of rewards compared to those that have lower operator bonds. And you might have other reasons to select nodes. Maybe you know the operator because they are very active community members, or they have been active for a very long time. So you might prefer nodes that have a longer lifetime versus nodes that are very new. That, okay, maybe this node has a very good performance, very good parameters, but it just popped up yesterday. Maybe they're going to be gone. So I'm going to do my delegation. And then when I come back to see my rewards, I will not have rewards because the guy was just trying things out and then and registered the node, and then I had an opportunity cost on my delegation. Okay, next slide. I'm forgetting to say the next slide. I'm sorry about that. So what do we do with this reputation? What is it good for? So we are actually using this reputation, which as I said, is kind of is the same as staking, level of staking. We use it for the selection of nodes, okay? So the mixed net is refreshed periodically, every hour, every epoch is reconstituted, and you're sampling new nodes to be part of this network. So the nodes that you select to be part of the network are selected based on their reputation, meaning based on the level of staking, okay? So if you have a node that has a lot of stake, this node will be selected much more frequently than a node that has very low stake. Okay, this is assuming that you have more nodes than you need, which is actually the case. I mean, we have like 400 nodes in the system, and we only need 240. So we are sampling 240 every time to be rewarded. So yeah, sampling is proportional to reputation. Now, there is this standby set. This is something that is available in the system, but we are currently not using it. We have the standby set as 0. The idea of this standby set is that changing the number of rewarded nodes in the network is kind of disruptive, right? Because if I change the number of nodes in the network, I will be changing the saturation point, right? Because if you recall it, the saturation point is actually the target staking supply divided by the target number of nodes. If I change the target number of nodes, I will change the saturation. So that means that people who were making decisions based on a saturation point and said, oh, I will delegate to this node because it's close to saturation, and it gives good rewards and blah, blah, blah. Now you increase the number of nodes, the saturation point goes down, and now this person's tokens are in an oversaturated node, which is suboptimal. So every time you change the number of rewarded nodes, you are kind of changing. It's going to require a bit of an effort from all the stakeholders to revisit their staking and maybe rearrange it if it's not optimal anymore with the new parameters. So it's not something you want to do too frequently, right? But still, you might have needs to kind of frequently upsize, grow, or diminish the number of nodes that are active in the network, depending on your usage. So you can use the standby set for that, basically. The idea is that you would say, okay, we're going to reward. I mean, I'm just going to make up some numbers now. Imagine we say we want to have 500 nodes rewarded so that we are able to grow to 500 nodes. But for now, we only need 240 in the system. So then you would say, okay, 240 active, the other 260 are in reserve. And that means that without any changes to the staking of the system, I can very quickly go from 240 to 500 in the network, and I can grow the capacity of the network without having to modify the staking, right? So this is what this is there for. Right now, we are not using this. We are having all the nodes that are selected for rewards. They are all participating in the mixednet as active. So basically, the number of rewarded nodes and the number of active nodes is identical, and the standby set is 0. But this is something that can be updated if necessary, without disrupting the whole staking of the system. Okay. So some nodes are selected for rewards. They get to do some work, and then they will receive rewards, and these rewards then are shared between the node operator and the delegates that are delegating to this node and contributing to the staking of this node and contributing to the node being selected for rewards. Okay, so let's look at now at the components of the reward scheme. Okay. So the first thing is that nodes have to be registered. So a stakeholder who wants to run a node will register the node and will declare will have a operator bond, which is a staking done by the operator himself, will declare a cost. So this used to be non-configurable. It was set to 40 NIMs per month, but now it's configurable. So you can change the node cost in your when you're setting up a node, and you also select a profit margin. This is how much of the rewards are kept by the operator and how much are given to the delegates that support the node. Then once the node is registered, any stakeholders can delegate stake to the node to increase the reputation, and this is up to the saturation point. And the system is such that if once a node is fully saturated, it's not really advantageous to delegate any more to it. You will be losing out in rewards compared to delegating to someone who is not saturated. Saturation point is the staking supply divided by the target of nodes, so that we can make sure that it's evenly distributed among k nodes in the ideal case. And then we have the full set of nodes with their reputation, and we sample them. It's basically a sampling without replacement, that you kind of probabilistically select those that have a higher reputation. The first set you use for active, and the second set you use for standby, although, as I said, right now the standby is 0, so all of them are active, okay? If you would have the standby set, they are also rewarded, but they are rewarded at a lower rate than the active ones because they are also required to do a lot less work. They are not really, they're just standing by. They are not really doing the work of shuffling packets. And then the nodes that are unlucky to not get selected in an epoch, they don't get rewarded for the epoch, but maybe they can get selected for the next epoch and be rewarded in the next epoch. Okay, so in terms of how this looks like in the current network, show you a few graphs here. So this one, this upper left graph, this shows the distribution of bonds. Okay, so the highest bond in the network is currently like 80,000 NIMs, and as you can see, it drops quite steeply, and most nodes have bonds below 10,000 NIMs. Okay, and then many of them have probabilities are like quite minimal bonds out of the 400 nodes in the network. And if we order them by full staking, the red line on top here, this is the saturation point. Okay, so we see that we have a few nodes that are close to saturation. There is one node above saturation, which has a 120% saturation, only one, and all the others are, getting close to saturation, but then they should, in the ideal system that would give out the maximum rewards, you would have like this. You would have exactly 240 nodes that are exactly at saturation. So the graph would be like a perfect square, right? This is how you distribute maximum rewards. And if the people have lower staking, then the rewards will be diminished accordingly. Right now, we have about 45 million staked in the network out of this target of 175. So the staking levels are kind of low. A lot of people that have tokens could stake their tokens that are not staking them currently. And in terms of the probability of being selected, so we are saying here that the selection of nodes for the mixnet is sampling that is weighted by the reputation. So the more reputation you have, the more probabilities of being selected. So that means that if you are one of these nodes here with high reputation, you will have much higher chances of working in the system, being selected for rewards than if you are one of the nodes with a smaller reputation. So how does it translate to in terms of probability to be selected? This is also based on the current system. If you have more than, I believe this is 5, 10, 15. If you have more than kind of 10%, if you have more than 10% saturation, your probability of selection is above 90%. So you're going to be selected almost all the time. If you have more than 15% reputation, you're going to be selected effectively, like nearly 100% of the time, right? If you have between 5 and 10% reputation. So these are kind of these guys here. So if you have between 5 and 10% reputation, then yeah, are you closer to 10? Are you closer to 5? You will be between 30% and 90% selected. If you have less than 5% saturation, then you will be selected less than 30% of the times. If you're one of these last guys here, you're going to be selected very rarely because you don't have enough reputation to be kind of considered a serious participant. Okay. So keeping with the components, so this is kind of the state of the network, the selection. We built the mixnet with the active nodes that we selected. And then these nodes are doing work. So people are sending packets, and these nodes are forwarding the packets, processing the packets. So then the next element is that we need to see that if these nodes that we selected to do the work, are they doing the work? Are they doing the work as they should? So for that, we need to do some performance measurement. And performance here effectively means, are they losing packets, or are they actually processing all the packets they receive and forwarding them on, right? So we are working on a fully decentralized solution that is a really cool system that uses like circuit shoppers, basically some messages are measurement messages that then get revealed at the end. And then that can allow us to sample nodes performance. For now, we have a kind of a placeholder solution where the validators are in charge of sending test packets through all the nodes and then recording which nodes are, when a packet is failing, and then based on that, they assign like those nodes to proportionally be losing some packets, so the performance is degraded. Regardless of how you compute the performance, the outcome is that you have a performance score. So this is a number between 0 and 1. When you have 1, means that all the packets, 100% of the packets were correctly processed. So this is, the fraction of packets that were correctly processed. So now you have everything. You have all these nodes. Each of them has a performance score. We have a budget that we want to allocate to these nodes, and this budget is coming from currently mixed mining emissions because we don't have input from fees. They are not yet deployed, okay? Once we have income from fees, we also have ideas on how to, the price is basically tied to fiat costs. So it's basically the costs of the mixed nodes to guarantee that they can cover operations, plus a profit fee on top that is for the full network, to how much over the operational cost is the price of the service. But we'll get to that later in the project. And then you have an algorithm to distribute rewards. So to distribute this budget that we have for the epoch, you distribute this budget among the nodes based on performance, reputation, whether they were active or in standby, and the operator bond. And then for each node, you further share between the operator and the delegates, and that depends on the cost and the profit margin. So looking a little bit more in detail, next slide, which I forget to say all the time. This is how the formula looks like. So basically this is the budget of rewards that you have for the full set of mixes of nodes that are active, okay? So you have a total budget of rewards. So what does one individual node get? So this budget multiplied by the performance score. So this is a number between 0 and 1. If you have perfect performance, you're multiplying by 1. So you're not diminishing this total budget. If you have a 0, you get 0 rewards. So no rewards for you if you kind of were offline. Okay, but let's assume it's 1. So let's assume performance is perfect. So you still have the full budget that you could get. The next step, the next factor is your stake saturation. This is again between 0 and 1. Oops. So if you have full saturation, this will be a 1. So again, you will be getting the full share of rewards. If you have less than full saturation, you're proportionally already diminished by the proportion of stake saturation that you're missing. And then the next element is depends on the share of work that you're doing. Currently, because all the nodes are active, the share of work is basically 1/k. So if you don't have a standby, share of work is 1/k. And then this alpha parameter, which is a civil protection factor, multiplies the bond saturation. Okay, so you have to see, like, you're doing work 1/k, if you have a full bond saturation, this is also 1 over K. So then here you have 1 over alpha, and then you get the full total rewards budget divided by the number of rewarded nodes. If you're kind of scoring a 1 in all of these elements, the performance score, the cap saturation stake, and the cap bond saturation. If you have anything that is less than 1 in the performance or in the saturation, then your rewards will be diminished here proportionally to the full budget, and here proportionally to the alpha fraction, which is actually 0.3, so 30%. This up and down depending on the bond saturation. Okay. So this is how you get the rewards for one specific node. At most, so in the best case, this is going to be 1 divided by K. K is the number of rewarded, so the total budget of rewards divided by the number of nodes. This is what you would get at most if you are performing perfectly in all of these things. So what are the properties here? The rewards are proportional to the performance, the reputation, and to some extent the operator bonds. A node may not maximize the possible rewards. If you have low performance, you don't maximize. If you have low reputation, you don't maximize. And if you have low bonds, you also don't maximize. Okay. The equilibrium, meaning when you're distributing perfectly all of the rewards, is exactly K nodes have exactly saturated reputation with exactly perfect performance. If you're not the money that the rewards that you're not giving to nodes because they fail to maximize, those are retained by the mixed mining pool. So those rewards, they were made available, they were not actually allocated, they just stay in the pool and they will be distributed in the future. The key parameters here is the size of the network, because this is the target number of nodes you want to have, and then that determines what is the maximum rewards per node. And then the civil protection parameter, this puts a financial penalty on operators that split their own stake. The proof is in the paper. Basically, it means that if you have a certain amount of stake, the best returns you can make is to put them all in the bond of one node, and that will maximize your rewards compared to splitting it over many. Once you have a node received some amount of rewards, now we have to distribute this between the operator and the delegates. So the first thing we do is that we subtract the node cost. Okay. So if you have to pay some money as operator to run this node, from the rewards you got as associated to the node, the first thing is to subtract the cost. And the income minus the cost gives you the profit. Okay. And this cost is allocated to the operator. This is a refund for the operator. Okay. And the rest, the profit, is divided between the operator and the delegates. So the operator will get of this remaining profit, the profit margin. So if you, for example, if you say my profit margin is 10%, then 10% of the profit will be given to the operator. Okay. And then besides that, the operator also gets on the remaining part that is not taken by the profit margin, they also take the proportional rewards corresponding to their stake, which is in this case the operator bond. So the operator will receive the aggregation of the cost refund and the operator profit. And what do delegates get? Whatever was the profit for the node after the cost, multiplied by whatever is not taken by the operator as profit margin, and then proportionally their percentage of stake over the total stake of the node. This is what the delegate gets, right? So if you have 1% of the total node stake, then you will get 1% of the profit that is not taken by the profit margin. So what are the properties here? We are prioritizing covering costs compared to distributing profits. So first you take the costs, and then if there is anything left, you distribute profits. The nodes are competing on cost effectiveness and profit margin, because a node that has a lower cost and a lower profit margin is able to offer better rewards to the delegates. Okay. If you're giving untruthful cost declarations, in the end, you're not really taking any advantage. We have proofs for that. And that kind of creates a market competition between nodes in terms of cost and profit margin to see like who can offer the best deal to stakeholders that can delegate while still covering operational costs. Once a node becomes oversaturated, the rewards that delegates get, the returns rate for delegates goes down with oversaturation. This is because here the total node stake really keeps growing, and then you have a lower percentage. For the same amount of stake, you have a lower percentage of the total, and then you're getting less than if this number is not as big. Okay, so just to finalize, to give you a sense of how the rewards look like in the current network, this is basically for one epoch, and this is the nodes organized by their saturation percent. So this is full saturation and ends here. This is the one, so these nodes are fully saturated. These nodes have very low saturation, and we have one node that is oversaturated here. So basically the node rewards are linear mostly linear with the saturation level, right? And then when you get to the saturation maxing, you max out, then it flattens. I mean, if you would have more dots, they would have like a straight line here, like this, flat line, because you get to the maximum and then it flatlines. These guys here that have a 0, they didn't get selected for this epoch. As you can see, all the people who didn't get selected, they had a saturation lower than 10%. Everybody with a saturation higher than 10% got selected and got rewards. And then in terms of the returns given to the delegates of these nodes, so this is for the node as a whole, and this is once we divide between operator and delegates, we can see, well, here, these are the same guys that basically didn't get selected. And then we can see that nodes with very low saturation, in some cases, offer very low returns. But once a node has more than 5 or 10% saturation, it offers a pretty decent APY. This is between 25 and 30% currently, depending on the profit margin, depending on the performance. So there's a bit of variation, but we can see that once you're past the threshold of like 10%, you're in a kind of same range. And does this work? Does the system actually, is there any correlation between the reputation and the performance? So this is I aggregated here for the last 10 days, all the hours together. And what we can see is that the nodes that have more than 10% saturation, they roughly have performance between 90% and 100. In some cases, in some instances, they are a bit lower, but mostly we can see that in most epochs, they have pretty good performance. Everybody with a saturation that is more than 10%. And then these guys here, which are the low reputation guys, we can see that these ones can have pretty bad performance sometimes. So it does work. Like if we were selecting nodes randomly, we would be selecting these guys that would be losing all the packets or be offline and kind of give a bad service to users. But thanks to the reputation-based selection, we are selecting from these people and kind of mostly not taking these people, meaning that we are selecting the nodes that have better performance. So that's kind of, it shows that the logic of the system is actually working in the current deployment. And that's all I have. I think there's a few minutes for questions.
Claudia, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have quite a few questions.
Oh wow! Okay, let's go.
Let's start with the one that I think will take the longest to answer. How do Sybil attack protection work? How does Sybil attack? Anyways, you know what I'm trying to say. Sorry for messing up my words.
Sybil attack, you mean in terms of staking or in terms of having a lot of nodes seeing traffic? I'm guessing is the second.
I think there's alpha in the equation, I would say.
Yeah, so I mean, there's two things, right? Like the alpha means that the alpha means that if I want to maximize my profits, what I can do is to put all my stake in one node that has a very high bond and will give extra rewards because of this alpha. So if I go back to the alpha here, see, like I will be able to maximize this quantity, and the sum of, maximizing this quantity for one node is actually beneficial for my rewards compared to having many nodes that have very tiny saturation, bond saturation. But I think the question is probably related to the bigger question, because this is about the incentive mechanism. If you have a greedy adversary that is trying to maximize rewards, then it's not profitable to run many nodes. It's more profitable to run one node and have a high bond saturation, right? But I guess the question is, how does this help to prevent civil attacks compared to a system that doesn't have any incentives, such as Tor, right? For example. And the question there is that, so how, if you want to compromise a full path, if you want to compromise packets privacy, right, you need to compromise the full path. So you need to own the 3 mixed nodes that are chosen in the path. How easy or difficult is that, right? So if you have a system that doesn't have any incentives, then you basically have to set up the computers, like in Tor, for example, you would have to set them up. You would have to be a bit careful to not set them up all at once or in the same location, as there is some manual checking that they can identify, oh, this looks like the same person. But if you're a bit careful, you introduce them one by one, you use like some diversity in your locations. Basically, with the cost of setting up a few nodes, you can set up nodes that have a lot of bandwidth, and then you would be able to see a significant fraction of the traffic, because the moment you are part of the network, you're chosen based on bandwidth. If you have a lot of bandwidth, you would be able to position yourself in these the different positions. Now here, in order to, you're competing with other people. So okay, yeah, I want to control these 3 nodes, but I mean, other people, in order to be here, I need to have reputation, right? I need to attract delegations. So either I spend a lot of money buying tokens to fully saturate my nodes and make sure that my nodes are going to have a high chance of being selected and seeing traffic, or I have to attract delegations, and that means competing with others that are also trying to get these delegations. So it's not so easy for me to just generate a lot of nodes and then, by virtue of having many nodes with bandwidth, just be part of the network and potentially be able to see a lot of traffic in the network. I would have to also get this reputation, which, because I'm competing with others, is an added difficulty compared to a system without incentives. Does that answer the question?
I think very much so. Yeah. So in a nutshell, that's how our tokenomics also ensure the privacy across the network.
Yeah.
Basically. Another question, since we mentioned Tor, is whether a gateway operator is just like the first relayer of Tor.
That's very
and
good.
part of this question is also
Very good question. I like that question.
Another follow-up question to this is whether the packages between gateways and mixed nodes are encrypted. I think
they are encrypted. Everything is encrypted. I mean, the packets that the gateway sends are Sphinx packets, so they have multiple layers of encryption. But on top of that, you can have a wrapper encryption in every link, right, between the client and the gateway, and so you can have like a TLS kind of session key, and have that as ephemeral, protection that on the outer layer. So that's an easy one to solve. How are gateways different from guards? That's a very good question.
Sorry to interrupt, but packets are encrypted and decrypted by the client, right? So everything between client and client is encrypted in multi-layer.
The payload, yes. I mean, there is an end-to-end encryption from client to client, but in addition to that end-to-end encryption, there is an encryption for every step of the way, right? Just one encryption is like nested encryptions, one inside of the other.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Yes, very much so.
So I mean, there's the clear text is buried under lots of encryptions. So yeah, it's not a problem. But okay, I'll answer the question about gateways. How the gateways compare to guards in Tor. So there's some important differences. So first of all, some similarities. So similarities are that one of the reasons to have a guard node in Tor is to prevent a couple of things. So one thing is that you expose your IP address to only the guard instead of to all the 6,000 nodes in Tor, right? Because you only interact directly with the guard. So it reduces the client IP exposure. That's one thing. And another thing is that if you have an honest guard, then end-to-end kind of compromise will not be possible, right? Because if the guard is honest, and even if the adversary compromises the rest of the nodes in the path, the guard is protecting the client from the adversary, right? If you have a different guard every time, then sometimes you might be lucky and you get an honest guard. Sometimes you might be unlucky and you get a malicious guard. And when you get a malicious guard, maybe the exit is also malicious. And if the guard and the exit are both malicious at the same time, they can do some correlation and try to identify the clients, right? So in that sense, gateways offer a similar functionality. They shield your IP address from the rest of the network. Okay, so that's one thing. Also, if you select an honest gateway, no matter what kind of compromise exists in the rest of the network, they will not be able to find you as an end user. At most, they will be able to see, okay, somebody from this gateway, but that's even if everything else is compromised. So those are similar. What is different is the following. In the guards of Tor, they are assigned algorithmically. Right? So you have your Tor client, and the Tor client will have some list of guards, and then we'll select one with some criteria, right? As a human, you don't make a decision on which guard you want. It's automatically assigned. In our case, the guard is chosen by the client, and there is a bit more of a relationship between the client and the gateway than the client and a guard. The guard in Tor is simply the first hop. The guard for us will have like some sort of relationship to the client because you will be spending with this guard like a voucher, an entrance ticket. The guard will keep, you make like a little account. It's like, hey, this is Claudia. Maybe I want to make this account with some pseudonym. This is Claudia. I have this voucher for, 5 gigabytes of bandwidth for the next month. So the gateway is going to, every time I come back, I will kind of authenticate to the gateway, say, hey, this is Claudia. I still have, of my 5 gigabytes, I still have 4 left. Please send this package for me to the network. Right? So there's a bit more of a relationship there. If you're not happy with the guard, because you might choose the guard based on other services the guard is providing, based on the reputation of the guard. We can envision these guards to be a bit like your VPN provider, that you use like for tunneling things, maybe some via Nym, some others. You see what I mean? You have like it's like your entrance point, and any flexible services, any relationship is there with the gateway. You don't have this in Tor because you don't even know who your guard is. It's just, you know it if you look into whatever the logs or something, but it's not visible to you as the human. It's basically algorithmically assigned, which also means you don't have a choice. Like if the guard is, you don't know if this guard is run by this person or that person, if you should choose this one or that one, you have no input in that decision, right? So I think it's good that the user has like full decision making with respect to the entity that they are going to be directly interfacing with, and then the algorithmic choices are for the rest of the path.
That was a very thorough answer. How many more questions do you have time
I can
for?
take another 10 minutes
Because
if
we
you
have quite a
want.
few good ones. Awesome. All right, great stuff. So there's another question about the ideal range of Nym service fees in about 1 to 3 years. So it's of course the asker is aware of how complex the system is, but just some ballpark figures.
So
from an end user's point of view.
The idea we have to have, this might be revisited because it hasn't yet been put in place, but the working idea we have is a dynamic posted price approach, right? I'm telling you like kind of the idea. This idea might be modified before it becomes a production thing. This is the working idea we have right now. So this dynamic posted price, the idea is that you would say, nodes give their cost, right? Their operational cost. I need whatever 400 NIMs a month to cover my costs. I need 300 NIMs a month. I need 1,000 NIMs a month. I need 70 NIMs a month. Each of them will kind of express their operational cost. And the idea is that you compute the fee for the users such that it would, on average, cover the operational costs of the nodes. Okay. And then on top of, so imagine the average operational cost is 100 NIMs per, no, let's say it's like 1 micronym per packet. I'm just making it up, right? This is the cost, the average cost of the nodes in the path. So you would say, okay, 1 micronym per packet. This is to cover costs. And on top of that, we say, like, for example, a 5% profit margin. It would be 1.05 micronyms per packet that I have to pay. And that would cover the operational costs of the mixed nodes, then leave some extra for profits. And you basically control it with a global variable. What is the global level of profit above the operational costs? So basically, the operational costs are what will define the prices for users, right? People that are running the infrastructure, they have to pay for hardware, they have to pay for bandwidth, they have to pay for processing power, whatever they have to pay for, right? So the price paid by users, it should cover that. Otherwise, the service is losing money, right? And the operators are losing money. So the idea is that they recover their costs, and then will be this will have to be agreed, I guess, by the set of operators, like what is the reasonable profit fee that is still reasonable for users, so that we actually maximize the income, because we maximize the number of, if you're too greedy and you say, okay, so we want to have a profit that is 100 times more than the cost, then sure, for whoever uses the service, you will charge them a lot, but you will not have much income because you will not have many people using the service. Right? So this is a kind of a bit of a price discovery as well. Does that make sense?
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, guys, this is very much a work in progress, so we don't really have a pricing
Could
model
end up
yet.
as an auction of some sort.
Another thing I heard, Claudia, I don't know.
Auction. The idea is that there should be some sort of market mechanism too. And what is important as well, I want to say this.
Another thing I heard,
these costs are tied to fiat, right? Because people are typically going to have to pay in dollars for their nodes, right? For their bandwidth or for their hardware, they pay in dollars, in fiat. Costs are denominated in fiat, and that means that the cost of the service will be kind of tied to fiat. So imagine that we say, okay, the cost is about $5 a month for whatever, 5 gigabytes, 1 month, $5. I'm just making it up. Then if 1 NIM equal $1, then that's five NIMs. And if $1 equal 10 NIMs, that's 500 NIMs, right? So the price of the token should not affect this economy, because it's basically being converted from fiat costs into the token, and then the collected tokens are given to the operators. Insensitive. The mixed mining reserve is, of course,
another thing I heard. Another thing I heard Harry say, I think I read it in the main Telegram group that we have. He said that approximately we're aiming for about the same cost for an average monthly user as it is currently for
that's a bit
the regular VPN.
The starting point. Yeah.
Is this not something?
The ballpark, but yeah. They have a bit higher costs because we are effectively having 3 intermediaries instead of just 1. But that's a bit the ballpark figure that we're aiming for, is something that should be kind of comparable to VPN services.
So it was a very thorough answer. So let's move on to the next question. What about mixed node DDoS protection? I think mixed nodes are not as threatened by DDoS attacks as gateways.
I mean,
would be, right?
I can say so. I mean, you can for a mixed node, you can configure it to say I only receive packets from my predecessors. You know, like if I am in layer 2 or layer 3, the who is in which layer is public, right? Because it's part of the active set of the epoch. So I can have like a restricted set of predecessors that I accept traffic from. Same for the gateways. For layer 1, you will need these gateways. They will be receiving user vouchers, and they will be signaling in the blockchain, hey, I got users voucher for 5 gigabytes, so I will be injecting 5 gigabytes into the network. You can also check when you're receiving data from a gateway whether this is a legitimate entity that has paid for bandwidth or not. So I think it's quite not too difficult to protect against DOS for mixed nodes. Of course, gateways that connect from end users directly, they might need a bit more protection because a priori they don't have a pre-approved list of predecessors.
Makes sense. I think this is the last question that I'm going to be asking you. It's a good one. So this is, I guess, from the fact that we recently changed the saturation point to reflect the changes in circulating supply. So how and how often will we be changing the target saturation point?
I expect that
target saturation point.
If we do a good job, I expect it to change every 3 months.
That's fine. That's exactly what he guessed.
Quarterly basis.
Maybe on a quarterly basis.
Quarter,
that was the last part of the question.
Increase in circulation supply with a vesting event, and at that point there is more tokens in the network, so you have to account for them when you're doing the staking allocations. Now, I say if we do a bad job, it would be possible that we do a very bad job, that the staking goes beyond this 50%, right? I don't know where I have that. So if we say the target is 50%, and then we have 60% staked, that's not ideal, because then what would happen is that you would have more than K nodes that are fully saturated. And then effectively what happens is that even if you're fully saturated, you're not chosen every time. So you're kind of in practice getting lower returns than you should. So that might require an adjustment of the target staking to raise the target staking to account for the large amounts of stake. But I don't expect that to happen. So my expectation is that every 3 months for the next year and a half, we will be adjusting it, and then it will stay constant once everything is vested.
Makes sense. Oh, maybe actually one more quick question. Someone is asking whether, just to confirm whether minimum 10% node saturation to be selected in the active set. Let's clarify that a little bit. It's not that simple.
You're talking about this. So this depends on the staking, right? This is not
yes.
This is not set in stone. Like this curve of the probability of being selected is directly derived from this curve that says what is the distribution of a stake. If you would have a situation where you have 100, like you would have like a lot of nodes that are close to saturation, then this would change. Then you would need to have close to saturation to be selected, you know? Right now, this 10% is enough because it's not very competitive. This dotted line here is if we would be selecting the top 50 to 40 instead of random, right? Just to order them by reputation, and you take the top 40. So you see that anybody that has more than this little value here will be selected, right? Because we're doing it randomly, what happens is that anybody who's like here gets almost always. Anybody who's here gets sometimes, and anybody who's here very rarely, right? If you would have many more saturated nodes, then having this saturation, and if you're kind of on this side of the curve, like pushed, then you would have lower chances. So this depends on how competitive this probability of being selected. I mean, if you're fully saturated, you will always have a very good chance. But how competitive it is for nodes that are kind of half saturated, it depends on how many there are, how much stake they have, and so this curve will change according to that.
So the short answer is that there's no clear cutoff at 10% or any percent. It's basically how stake is currently distributed on the network. Based on that, right now 10% seems to be the cutoff where above 10% nodes are selected decently often.
That's because
and then
it's
below
not so
that,
competitive
not so much.
right now. Because if you see here, the number of saturated or close to saturation nodes is actually low, right? You have to choose from this set here, which has like quite low saturation. The more stake there is in the system, the more competitive it becomes, and the more difficult it becomes from people with low stake to actually be selected.